Welcome to the Science of CX podcast. My name is Steve Pappas, a former serial entrepreneur turned CX obsessed expert. And each week we bring you an inspiring message and insight into how customer experience can catapult your business to soar, grow, and accelerate beyond what you thought was possible. We seek out experts to interview and help you on your journey to CX in the science of CX. Well, welcome everybody to another show. You're here for the Science of CX once again. My name is Steve Pappas, your host, and we have looked everywhere to make sure that we're bringing all aspects of the customer experience to you. We've embarked on this entire series here. This entire season is really geared around bringing experts from all areas of customer experience to you. So we create that little MBA of the background. So you understand from all different aspects a little bit more about how CX is affected and you can do better for your customers. So today we've got another guest on. Today we have Avi Mash. Welcome, Avi, to the show today.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
Well, Avi is going to talk about something that none of our other guests have talked about. And we're really going to be talking about a few new areas, or I don't want to call them new, but they're definitely areas around digital experience management and analysis. And those of you that are thinking about CX, those of you that are practitioners around CX, I'm sure you're thinking about the digital experience also, in addition to the various aspects of the physical customer experience. And you're probably also thinking about the bot experience these days too. So let me tell you a little more about Avi so you get a sense of who we're talking to today. So Avi Mash is an enterprise sales director at Content Square. He's got over 10 years of experience in this software arena, and he's had the opportunity to work with strategic accounts throughout the Fortune 500. So he can bring some knowledge about what big companies are doing in respect to the digital experience world. And he's got a firm understanding of how complex organizations and the ability to provide a consultative approach to their specific challenges. And they're across the board. And they're facing these in today's environment and really trying to ensure a unique and seamless user experience across all their digital properties and assets. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So Avi, can you kind of explain to us, just for those that may not be that familiar with digital experience management and analysis, what that really is and what does it entail and how wide of a field is that?
Yeah, sure. So traditionally, there's Adobe Analytics, there's Google Analytics, what we call those traditional analytics, right? We started in 2012, and we were really looking to solve for understanding how people are experiencing the customer experience across digital properties, right? So if you think about in today's environment, traditionally you have a physical store, there's a whole experience that gets involved. So you see stores like Restoration Hardware, they have this whole experience. Really, every single physical storefront tries to embody that. Now, when we take a look at the digital properties, you don't have the value there of having a store manager where someone's lost, they're looking for, a specific item, they're getting confused, they're frustrated. Typically in the store, someone can come up and help them, right? And then on the digital platforms, we don't have that luxury, of course. And so what we've built is a technology that effectively solves for that. So across all of your digital properties, whether that is on a desktop, on mobile, as well as mobile app, customers are coming on and getting frustrated. So, again, with traditional analytics, with Adobe and Google, they do a great job of showing those customer journeys, general demographics of who's coming to your website, how long they spent on the site, what pages. So I almost make this analogy as a camera facing outside of a storefront. You can see who's coming in, how long they spent, when they left, did they buy something? Whereas Content Square almost acts as a camera inside of the store, right? Where they can actually start to see how the different behaviors when you are hovering over or you're looking at, let's say, a suit jacket, right? You're engaging with that. You may not actually buy that specific product. You may not, quote unquote, click on that product or pick that product up in the physical storefront, right? But on the web, you may still be influenced by that particular product. And instead of buying that suit, you drive further down, quote unquote, that funnel or go further into the store and ultimately buy a tie. So, what we're able to do is start to understand how certain content, certain elements within the page are ultimately driving increases in conversion, driving more revenue for businesses.
Well, that's interesting because it sounds like not only are you looking at what they're clicking and where they're going, but you're looking at other behavioral triggers that may be bringing some of that knowledge or that data that you're gathering in to provide more insight for the business. Am I tracking right there?
Exactly. So those traditional analytics where they do a great job of what we call event-based triggers. So when
Right.
someone actually clicks, there is a lot of intent and ideation or inspiration that goes on, right? A lot of these brands are trying to tell stories. For instance, one of our clients is a luxury jewelry company, and there was a back and forth discussion between the merchandising team and the creative team. The merchandising team said there's no reason to put a $20,000 necklace as the homepage because no one's buying a $20,000 necklace online. However, they were arguing that they should put the $200 necklace as the forefront. But what we were able to find is that when they had the $20,000 necklace at the front of the page, that actually served as inspiration. And they ended up selling more $200 necklaces that was much smaller part of the page because it did serve that inspiration. They were hovering over that, engaging with that. And then ultimately, of course, they went on to buy something further down the funnel that was not that initial item that served as that inspiration.
Interesting. Okay, so that's probably why I looked for Ferraris and some other cars, but I ended up with a Kia.
Exactly.
I got inspired. Anyway, let's move on a little bit. So I understand that there's an analysis that's happening. So you're actually recording these sessions, but we have a lot of folks in our listening audience based on the backgrounds. We know a lot of them are in healthcare, a lot of them are in banking. So you're, I guess, recording every session. They're wondering whether or not there's any PHI or PII type information going along. But tell us how that happens. How do you record? You're recording the sessions, right?
Yeah, so from a technology standpoint, that's how we're able to understand those behaviors. Of course, we are completely PII compliant, GDPR, California Protection Act, all of those are at the forefront of every single customer. We work with 30% of the Fortune 500. We are also engaged with many of the largest banks, largest insurance companies of the world that, of course, have that in the back of their head and want to make sure that their customer information is not being physically recorded. So we don't actually record each and every single user. What we're doing is recreating that. And so what we'll do is actually take the aggregate of every user that comes. So 100% of your traffic that's coming to your site. What we're
Okay.
able to do is then aggregate it. Of course, we care if there's one customer that's frustrated. We care a lot more as a business if 100,000 people are experiencing that same frustrations throughout the website. And from a PII standpoint, of course, that again is at the forefront of everyone's mind. The way our technology works is we don't actually any type there's a form field, so typing in your credit card, your name, your address, that of course automatically is completely blacked out. And then when it comes to even sometimes some of our customers are saying even the zip code is PII, right? And so we have a way to manually go in and make sure that no data is actually being able to be recorded, even from the customer perspective, because that could also get leaked. A big customer of ours in pharmaceutical, we were the first vendor in 20 years that had passed their security test on the first go with zero red lines whatsoever.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, so let me ask you, how long do you have to run this analysis, on the digital experience itself to really get to a meaningful point where the data that's derived from it, the aggregation of the data is meaningful enough that somebody can make better decisions on it? Is that a week, a month, a year? I mean, how long does it have to run?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it really depends on the size of the business, right? So, and that's based off how much traffic you're getting to the site. Of course, if you have one person or two people coming to your site, that's a lot different story than some of our customers that have billions of page views per month, right? For a company that has a billions of page views per month, maybe it's just a few days to actually start to collect that data where it's actually meaningful data, as you mentioned. For some of our smaller companies, we typically say 2 to 3 weeks, but then it's an ongoing experience. So the second that we have our tag on your site, from there on forward, we're able to 24/7 be able to collect the data of all the different behaviors that are occurring within the website itself.
Great, great. Okay, well that makes sense. So maybe we could talk about, you know, I guess the companies are coming to you. Some of them know they've got a problem. Others think they have a problem, and others probably don't think they have a problem. So, what are the use cases? You know, why are people coming to you? What are the types of scenarios that are or conversations that they're having in a conference room that says we need something like a digital experience management analysis tool?
Sure. No, it's a really interesting question. And obviously, the elephant in the room, COVID is going on. Stores do not have a physical storefront anymore. So,
Right.
what was going to happen, anyways, where we see this trend where more and more people are using e commerce? What's really interesting is, of course, now with no storefronts, that oftentimes is the only stream of revenue for a lot of these businesses. So, I don't want to say that we've necessarily benefited, but our business has actually been thriving recently due to the conditions of the market. Folks like my parents who never really bought anything on e-commerce. There is now millions of new people that have now made their purchases forcefully through e-commerce. And those behaviors are actually not going to change, right? So people now realize how easy it is. And so all those people that typically would go into the store have now started to use e-commerce as their main avenue for purchases. And that behavior is now ingrained into their day to day. In talking with businesses, we really see that trend accelerating. I've talked to some CMOs that say this is really accelerated almost 30 years. 30 years from now, I believe we'll be able to think about what we want and that product will show up. So really, it has accelerated 3 to 5 years due to COVID. And in terms of some of those use cases or that burning question of why do we need that a good customer experience is there is so many options out there today. If I want to go to travel, there's 50 different travel sites. There's a million different retail sites that I could go to. And so oftentimes people tend to buy from the stores online that have a great experience, right? And that's of course overarching. You want to have a good experience for your customers, of course. But from a business side of things, it's really important to understand you're spending a ton of money on content, making videos, articles, images, etc. You're spending a lot of money on that. And so understanding what content is actually not only relevant, but what's ultimately driving users to convert. Oftentimes we'll take a look at carts, for instance. Where are people dropping off at the cart? How much of the form field is being filled out? Why are people dropping off? And so that's really the overarching question that we're looking to solve. Again, with those traditional analytics like Adobe and Google, which I do want to mention, we certainly do not compete with whatsoever. We do have integrations and partner with them, but they solve kind of the what is happening. We're solving for why did someone drop off without converting, right? And so being able to understand how people are engaging with specific elements when they do hover or engage with a particular product, what's the next action for e-commerce? It may be wanting to understand what percentage of the time do they go on to add something to a cart. Maybe folks in content want to understand, are we driving people to a specific promotion page, right? And so typically the users of Content Square, we like to say that we democratize the data where you don't necessarily need to have a PhD in analytics to start to understand your impact on the business.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. We're going to have to stop right there and take a quick break. Let's have a word from our sponsor, and we'll see you all back here in 45 seconds.
Panviva has 25 years of empowering customer service, and we have deep expertise in how people actually use information, from our roots in learning and performance. We offer accurate, consistent information on demand to every channel, most relevant knowledge at your people's exact moment of need, integrated, streamlined internal processes, systems that deliver memorable and remarkable customer experiences that boost customer attention and loyalty every time, and knowledge that extends across your entire digital landscape. To learn more, visit Panviva at www.panviva.com.
And we're back, and we're talking to Avi Mash of Content Square. This has been really enlightening for me because it's not an area that we get to talk to an expert about all the time. So, in understanding the use cases where this, the digital experience comes into play, maybe we could just go a little further in this. That how does that affect the UX strategies? So you're doing an analysis and you're understanding that, but then do you work with the user experience team within the organization to make changes and then reassess or reanalyze whether or not that's working?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And to dig a little bit deeper there, we certainly work with UX folks, we work with e-commerce folks in analytics. As I alluded to earlier, they use us in different ways to understand what's important for their KPIs. Again, e-commerce cares about adding to cart, content driving to specific pages, of course. Analytics wants to get the whole breadth of what's happening on their site. And so it could be as simple as understanding, hey, why are people not clicking on a certain product? It's a brand new product. We thought it was great as a marketing team. We don't understand why people are not engaging. So sometimes it's as simple as, hey, has this even been seen? So a very simple KPI that we have is understanding how much of the page has been exposed. A lot of large organizations we have, after you go below the fold, you've lost 50. We've had some clients that have lost 90% of people that don't even get below the fold, right?
Really?
So being able to, yeah, so that's, I mean, that's a very basic example, but even going further in that, understanding not only how much of the page has been exposed, but for how long. And it's really interesting too, especially when you think about more and more traffic going to mobile. People tend to do this compulsive scrolling. They're used to social media, they want more content. And so just looking at the exposure rate alone of how much of the pages has been seen is not always the best metric to take a look at. So exposure time is really important too. Understanding not only did they see it, but for how long were they actually consuming that content. So we have a lot of B2B clients that obviously is very important. We work with pharmaceutical companies. You obviously cannot buy drugs online, but you want to understand maybe a specific subset of doctors. Are they just going to the page? What parts of the content are they actually reading, and how long are they reading that for, right? And so those are some more of the UX metrics. We have a metric called attractiveness rate, which kind of combines those with if a product or if a piece of content has been seen, what percentage of the time are they clicking on that, right? And so that's really interesting too, of understanding, okay, maybe only 10% of users saw, let's say, a t-shirt at the bottom left hand side of the page where, again, only 10% see it, but of that 10%, 90% when they do see it, click on it. In that case, we would make the suggestion to your earlier point of what do you do with that, to potentially A B test moving that product up the page, because it is a very attractive element on the page, but people just are not simply seeing it, right? And so those are some of the more basic understandings where people can really get this information quickly at their fingertips. They don't need to write SQL queries. They do not need to go and talk to their IT department to understand. And that's another element where Content Square is very powerful, is we do not need to manually tag every single element. So for those of you that are familiar with Adobe and Google Analytics, you have to go in and manually tag every single new product that you put on. With Content Square, kind of the magic potion we have is the ability to have any new product that's coming on, we automatically tag that and can retroactively collect data. So you're not stuck in a situation where, like, oh shoot, it's Black Friday, I threw up a bunch of new products, I forgot to tag them, and now Black Friday is over and I can never collect data on that. We can actually retroactively go back, and even if you forgot to tag, still be able to collect data on those new products without having to wait a few days to analyze that and then make the change when, of course, again, it's too late. So,
Interesting. Well, I've got to bring it back now to the customer experience. So, when we talked last time, you talked about a thing called frustration scores, and in customer experience, we are always concerned with the friction or the frustration or the amount of effort that the customer has to go through to be able to do whatever they need to get something. So, tell us a little bit about the frustration scores, and then we'll jump into how does that affect the customer and their experience too.
sure. I mean, even though I work at Content Square, I'm also a human and a consumer, and I've experienced it myself. And oftentimes I'm talking to friends and family who experience and say, this website had a terrible experience, or I tried to do this, I tried to do that, and it did not function. So I guess a quick example, we have a metric called like rage clicking with Google Analytics and Adobe. If someone's clicking on an element on the page that's not a clickable element, there's no way for you to understand what we call this rage click, where one click, one action is the ideal result. But in reality, there's oftentimes that people are clicking on text that they think is going to bring them to another page, but it doesn't. So you can see what we call, again, that rage clicking, where they're clicking 3, 4, 5, 6 times. In that case, we'd say potentially make that a clickable element and bring them to a new page. Oftentimes with form fields, for instance, we had a client that when you type in your zip code, it was supposed to predefine the city that zip code was correlated with. However, when people were typing in their zip codes, the wrong city popped up. You could see that people were trying to click in that multiple times to edit that field. Obviously, a quick fix for IT that they could do overnight. But we were able to then not only qualify what the challenge was or where people were getting frustrated, but also quantify. If this is happening to 50,000 people, clearly that's a big gap where you're losing revenue and you're losing customers, and those customers may not come back again. This happened to me. Actually, I was sending flowers to one of my clients, and I went to a flower company's website. I won't share the name, but that exact scenario actually happened to me, where I ultimately went to their competitor's site and it was a little easier for me to get through, and they lost that customer, and now I have a loyalty program with the other customer, and so now I'm potentially a lifelong customer for them. And so little things, I mean, people are ruthless, and consumers are ruthless. And because there's options, and obviously with e-commerce, people can start companies left and right. So we see this a lot in the beauty industry, where you can start a company overnight on Instagram or other areas where there are a lot of options for these consumers. And so to nail down that customer experience and surface those insights to you right away is more important than ever, especially going back to the fact that you don't have physical storefronts, at least for the near and potentially longer term future right now.
Yeah, that's very true. So I guess if we talk about those between rage clicking, which is a term I never knew before, which is good to know, thank you, and the frustration scores, I guess that can bring back the data that management can look at to make better decisions around how to make those changes. But ultimately, do you find that you work with customer experience folks too within these organizations? Not just the technologists on the UX team or the business people, but also the ones that are concerned with the experience of the customer on the digital side of their house?
Yeah, certainly. So a few use cases that come to mind. There's VOC, for those unfamiliar, that's voice of customer. So a lot of brands that we work with will have that form field that pops up and says, what's the score 1 through 10, for instance, right? Oftentimes in the contextual where they type in why they gave that score, they could say something like, I couldn't find what I was looking for. Now, from the customer experience, if I'm working at their brand, I am lost. I know they gave a bad score. I know they couldn't find what they're looking for. What does that actually mean, though? Right. So being able to integrate our technology with understanding, okay, what was that user actually doing? Of course, we won't know that user's name or personal information, but we could go ahead and click with one button and watch an actual session replay of that specific user to start to understand that. So where that becomes valuable is one, giving more context to why they had a bad experience, of course. And then another example too is there's massive call centers that take place, and that each call costs company money, right? And so if we can allow consumers to have that self-service by being able to find what they're looking for before they click that call button, that is really important for brands, right? And so in thinking about that further is, we had mentioned, if I hover over specific elements, do I add something to a cart? Obviously that's important. But again, to your question of understanding, if I am reading specific content and then we can see that after reading that content, 90% of people go to hit contact us button, that's a problem, right? That means that more people are calling. So when working with telecommunication companies, gas companies, any company that has a massive amounts of users calling in with frustrations and trying to figure that out, let's take a look to see what happened. Again, going back to that customer experience across your digital platforms that caused users to hit that contact us button.
Okay. How about if we give our listeners a little homework assignment, right? Let's assume that they can't buy anything right now, but from your expertise, what would you recommend that our listeners, when they're back talking to their team on Zoom tonight or tomorrow night or whatever, they start to think about, and how should they communicate the digital experience? Because we have folks from the mom and pop shops all the way up to Fortune 100s and global 100s that are listening. But what can they do to start understanding the digital experience a little bit better? Because it is new, and it's not necessarily commonplace for everyone's vocabulary yet. What kind of a homework assignment? Where do they begin just to start thinking about these things?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, as someone that works for their own brand, of course, they can do this themselves. I would also suggest, given that you as a marketer likely know your website inside and out for the most part. So I would always suggest, bringing a friend or a family member saying, hey, play around with my site, try to buy this t-shirt, try to sign up for our loyalty program, try to, register or set up a lead form and so forth. And just get the reaction and see if they're able to do that in a seamless motion, right? And so again, kind of going back to this notion of we think this perfect world, we have this image that we show of two different paths. So there's a paved path of how marketers envision people coming on the site. They grab their product, they check out, they're on their way, everything's all butterflies and roses in that scenario. But in reality, we have the same image. There's someone walking down that dirt road of what the real user experience is, right? And especially as I mentioned earlier, there's millions of new people having these behaviors of coming on your site. Traffic is up really across the board for a lot of our customers, and starting to understand that every single user is coming from a different level of maturity when it comes to digital. So again, that's why we want to look in aggregate. And of course, we care about that one person, but we care if 100,000 people are experiencing that. And so being able to start to understand where you are not able to complete a transaction potentially when it comes to add to cart. If people are typing in promo codes, I just actually had this happen to me, funny enough, an hour ago. I was trying to buy something and typed in the promo code and it wasn't working, even though exactly the 20% off was there for me to click on. It was not going. So I actually ended up going to a competitor. And the experience for me to go from point A to point B and go on with my day was much more seamless there. So coming back to your question, I know this is a bit long-winded of kind of homework you can do. One thing we do, and this is a suggestion I often share with companies that are having that question, we have a light version of our product that we can plug on for free for any company. And they can start to explore things such as how much of the depth of the page has been seen, how long that has been seen for, right? I make this analogy of having this night vision goggles into how people are actually behaving into your site. And so it's very helpful to actually start to understand and have data to drive some of these decisions rather than just hypothesizing as to why things are happening. And having that data allows you to make obviously more informed decisions, but also oftentimes we'll talk to, marketing managers or people in analytics that don't have that data to go to their higher ups or their bosses and say, hey, we should make this change to the website. Well, now they can because they have some data to ultimately show their bosses as to what's actually happening.
That's great. Well, I think that that rounds out our day together. I think we've learned a lot of valuable lessons around digital experience management being very important, something that all of our listeners should be thinking about. And if you're not, you might want to start to go down that path and, make sure that you're getting the feedback from all of the people that are coming to your site. Make sure you're getting feedback as real time as possible to ensure you're satisfying their needs, to ensure that they're finding everything that they were looking for, and you're providing a much better customer experience, being a digital customer experience, as all of our listeners are very customer focused. So, Avi, I want to thank you for your time and your expertise, and thanks for coming on board today. And hopefully, you'll join us again in the future.
I'd love to. Thank you so much, Stephen. It was a pleasure.
That's great. So if folks want to check out more about what Content Square could do for them, they can go to contentsquare.com. And as Avi said, that there is a free version that you could get started with and trial out whether or not digital experience management and analysis is something that could help you provide a better overall customer experience from the digital side as well as in the future physical side. You want them both to match. You want your customers to feel like they're getting the best service and the most frictionless operation, whether it be in the real world or on the digital side. So again, thank you, Avi. Please, stay in touch with us and take care and stay healthy too.
I appreciate it. You as well, Steve.
Thanks. Everyone, that was another episode of The Science of CX. I'm Steve Pappas signing off, and I hope to see you in the next episode. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care.